So let's extend our learning real quick here. In general about Sir Michael Barber and in general about his approaches, and we can make some connections to his chapter in our book Change Wars. I'm just going to bring up a quick point here about why he's important and why his philosophies are important. I just thought this was interesting. This article here in this chapter in Leading Educational Change book. It's called Directions of Change, and it basically just talks about why the United States and China are moving in opposite directions. And by opposite direction, it means China is moving towards an American educational system from maybe the early 90s, late 80s, a time when America began to move away from our traditional system and towards what we might see as more of a China-based system. This is occurring because both nations feel that it's important to improve education. They see it as the most vital component of an increasing workflow and increasing economic prosperity for each country, yet they seem to be moving in opposite ways. So I think that's a good basis for why this is important and why Sir Michael Barber in particular is important. In his seminal work, Deliverology 101, as you can see here, Barber puts out this idea that basically, in order for educational systems or other systems to change, basically a government or a large entity needs to produce a very defined set or measurable section of data in order to create that change. So what that means is if I'm a government, I should say that I want my education system to look like this, define a target, and then that allows that system to move towards that measurable target. So that's all. Quickly summarizing this massive textbook is this idea of this is how you move things forward, and this directly connects to what he's saying in chapter 3, where if we're going to create massive change within an educational system, then we need to create a set of standards and measurable targets. Now, that could be seen as a problem because a government or a person who dictates those measurable targets may not necessarily create a measurable target that is important or effective, and what they define as good, someone else may not necessarily define as good. Let me give you an example here. If we take a look at one of his, this is a nice PDF here, summary of Deliverology. So as I was reading through Deliverology and this particular thing, I really focused on this piece right here. To reach an 85% graduation rate, The point of this is this measures up with the overall concept of Deliverology, which is we're going to create a target, and then our system will meet that target by whatever means necessary. So a quick anecdote is this type of target was set for a previous school that I worked in Florida. We needed to increase our graduation rate. So that's what we did. We just increased our graduation rate. Now, how did we do that? Some may say that we delivered initiatives that increased reading, and students therefore graduated because we did something with reading. But the reality is we just lowered our standards for what we as teachers and as a school were going to say a student needed to graduate. And by that I mean we basically just allowed students to pass classes. We increased the amount of students in special education so that they could get waivers for state examinations. We did whatever tactic we could do to increase graduation rate, and we had to do it quickly. We were a failing school. The state was threatening to shut us down, so the only option was to quickly begin increasing on measures like this. The point being that Deliverology establishes a measurable goal, but the means in which that goal is achieved is less, that may be less than questionable, may be completely unethical in some cases. So if we base our entire system as as Barber proposes on just measurable goals, we have to be very careful about what those goals are and what those standards are and how we get there. So many opponents of deliverology, and I showed you some at the beginning when I asked you to complete that survey and just say, is this idea good or bad? Is his proposals good or bad? And I asked you to make a quick off the cusp judgment, but there are many opponents to this standards-based education and this idea that government should be the driving force. I particularly like this one here at this blog at the World Bank. And I really liked it because of this section here, that these measurable targets leave out what the real client is. Measurable targets become a government-based target, something that can be published in newspapers, something that we can say, look at the progress we've made, when in reality we are not actually meeting the needs of our students and increasing their overall productivity. So I think that if we really look at this in a different way, we can say, okay, well, America is falling behind in the sciences. And if we're falling behind in the sciences, then obviously we should produce less scientists, we'll be less prominent in the world. All of these tests, whether it's the PISA or the TIMSS tests, show that America is behind in science. So therefore we should establish some higher standards. But if you really look at it, America traditionally and continues to be the producer, one of the greatest producers of scientists. So how does those things mesh? If we say that we are not good at science, and that is going to hurt our overall educational system, then how is it that we produce such great scientists? And why would a country like China want to create a system more like ours when we want to create a system that's actually more like theirs? This article in Scientific American here, goes on to propose that actually America produces more scientists, not because of a great scientific education, but precisely because of our education in general. That we have more scientists than what we need, and that actually our educational system has produced many of the top learners in the world. And that when you really break down data to its core, that success is not so easily defined by overall general principles, which is really what deliverology says. Deliverology appears to me to be a political game that politicians play to say, we have this broad number and therefore we've graduated more students, we've increased standards, but the reality could be very much different than that. And so we could take a look at some further work by Barber and really Michael Folan too. They both were heavily involved in the Ontario educational system, and they've written a series. You can go to Michael Folan's website here, and you can just see a ton of articles by him. And really, they worked on this together, so we can make some connections here. And you can see most of these articles are based on things like this: 900 high schools to an 82% graduation rate. So sounds like a great thing, and this is deliverology at its core, that we're just going to increase a graduation rate. And then when we do that, we can demand success. But Barber and really Folan have to acknowledge to some degree that just increasing the graduation rate does not improve the educational system. It just increased the graduation rate and is that the same thing. So they've actually begun to move to another piece of their work, which is to say, okay, now we've got your attention because now we say we're successful. Ontario gets to walk around and say, look at all the progress we've made. But the real fact is we don't know if they've made actual progress towards creating a citizen that is more prepared to enter the world and enter the workforce. So, have we created creative, imaginative, innovative students? And these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves. And really, these are the questions that Folan and Barber are asking themselves as they look at the Ontario system. They're saying, okay, now we have to move away from these measurable goals and we have to move towards these 6 principles. Now that we've increased the graduation rate, now we have these things. And maybe they're saying this because they have the capital now to say, look, we've had success in other areas. Now you can invest in us in these areas because these are actually what's important. That students be able to critically think and problem solve and collaborate and become creative and imaginative, that they are strong kids, that they have the ability to regulate themselves, that they can communicate. I don't want to get into citizenship right now, but that's something else entirely. But I think it's something that we need to really think about when we read chapter 3 and Sir Michael Barber's approach in general is this overall concept of just establishing a goal and then measuring your success off of one measure or 2 measures or however many measures needs to really be taken with a grain of salt. Is that really what the point of our education system is? Is that how we created scientists? Is that how we created mathematicians? Is that how we became an innovator in the world? Or is it by creating an education system that included these things? And these things are created at the local level, not by governments and politicians. These things are infused by well-motivated, well-intentioned teachers, staffs, schools, and really, as pointed out in that World Bank blog, by the clients, which are actually households and children, by parents and students. These are who create real change. And I think Deliverology, in general, misses this point. And it's something that when we read chapter 3, we really need to be careful of how we interpret those things and how we interpret success in ourselves.